shooting, free throw attempts, all these things that you would really, really like. Is it enough to get through Cleveland? I still don't think so. Now, that's obviously the goal, but, I mean, I know that's what you want is the answer right away. I know this is the excitement, the recency of this, but he, by himself, added to the Celtics team that's a very weird historical number 1 seed. That's not good enough. There's still a team that needs some better defense, I think, around the rim. I think they're clearly one of the worst rebounding playoff teams from last year. So, look, we're not all the way through this thing. So let's see what happens. But as of right now, just to say they're the favorites over Cleveland, that'd be a mistake.
All right, so there's a fine line here on a successful offseason or an offseason that's a dud for Danny Ainge, considering the assets that he had coming in. A couple weeks ago, I think a lot of people were like, what is he doing? Why are you trading that number 1 pick? You're not going to get Paul George here. To get Hayward and then Jason Tatum and then an extra pick potentially next year or 2 years from now, that could be the Kings pick here. How would you judge Ainge's offseason?
I don't know how you could give it anything lower than an A. I mean, this is incredible. And I don't understand, like, you're right, the fine line thing. If Hayward stays in Utah, which very well could have happened, then Ainge is some sort of failure. I mean, think how many different fan bases are going around each summer in the NBA going, oh, nobody wants to come here. Well, it's kind of the way it works. Like Pat Riley, who pulls off the biggest free agent coup ever 7 years ago. So now what? Was he just lucky? Well, yeah, a little bit. But is he a bum? Well, no, but like they can't get anybody to go down there and take all that money, and we think of that as a really good destination. So there's all of these fan bases throughout the years that have cap space that roll into it, and it doesn't work out. It hadn't worked out for Boston for decades until they go Horford Hayward. So anybody that wants Butler, I'm still not sure who to believe on the price. You want to talk about all the nonsense and lies I heard? Think about all the interaction I'd had, other reporters have had after the Paul George trade. We're like, oh, better offer, better offer, better offer. You're like, so wait a minute, the Thunder turned down 5 better offers and took this one? So if you're Ainge and you didn't add Paul George to this offseason and Gordon Hayward, and like that's the thing everybody wanted, that would have been absurd. But I also think it'd be the same fan base up in arms if Paul George bounces to the Lakers in 2018 and the Celtics gave up a Tatum or a top 5 pick next year. So I think he's incredible.
Before Hayward, most of the free agent signings were with teams out west. Why are players going out west when the Warriors obviously stand in their way?
Well, the Paul George part, it's pretty obvious. Now the Pacers like almost spitefully wanted to make sure he wasn't even in the East. True. That wasn't his control. The Butler trade, it looks like the pieces are the same pieces that we thought were going to happen a year ago, so they had that in play. I don't know if that was trying to keep him out of the East, too, which is kind of silly. Like, if I look at the Pacers, I'd be like, are you worried about Paul George for 1 year? Like, what are you guys going to do this year? So the other free agents, Paul stays, Blake stays with his own team. I mean, this has been going on for such a long time that you thought there'd be some kind of correction, and it hasn't happened. It's getting even worse. And then there's certain draft picks where you go, wait a minute, so this guy ends up the number 1, now he's out west too? So I would think maybe there would be some sort of thing that happens here in a year, especially if LeBron ends up leaving Cleveland, where you'd think somebody would look at this and go, this is a wide open path right now. And I think that's what Boston feels like. This is a piece in front of the next piece that says, all right, there's a team, there's a player who's disgruntled, who's a star in the West, goes, let me go back out East. But I'm going to tell you, Jay, it's a great question because I've been waiting for this thing to kind of come cyclical, and it's been way too long.
Yeah.
You know? So I don't think guys are looking at the West saying I'm afraid of Golden State necessarily, but I think you could see the East opening up. But I've been saying this for a long time, and it just hasn't really corrected itself.
As a basketball guy, I mean, what's your biggest takeaway from all of this that we're seeing right now across the landscape of the NBA?
I think 2 things are happening. One, that we're having a situation, and it hasn't played itself out fully yet, but it definitely did with Durant, where we thought these heavily weighted contracts would favor the team keeping their guy. Now, that happened with Golden State and keeping Durant, but I think the money is so terrific for these top players that some of them are going to start saying it doesn't really matter if I leave a few million on the table now because of how much I'm going to make. So the advantage that the CBA was supposed to have built in to keep players in their hometown, that may not actually happen. I think the other thing that's really important here is that post-LeBron going to Miami and Durant going to Golden State, there's so many other players that are going to go, wait a minute, I can't get dumped on publicly any worse than those 2 guys did.
Right.
So if this is all about an arms race and this is all about teaming up, like, what do I care? These guys are pioneers, man. They've laid the path for me to follow, and I can just jump ship and join up with a bunch of other superstars too because everybody's already crushed those guys for it. So I think those are the 2 things you're going to look at in the next couple of years of how the NBA plays out.
It's fascinating.
It is. It really is. All right, Ryan's going to be back next hour with plenty more from around the NBA.
Let's get to it. Gordon Hayward to the Celtics, said to be a 4 years, $128 million deal. The 27-year-old forward coming off career year in Utah, where he averaged 22 points and more than 5 rebounds and 3 assists per game. Hayward making his announcement today on the Players Tribune, saying, in part, this has been the toughest decision that I've ever had to make in my life. After 7 years in Utah, I have decided to join the Boston Celtics. I also feel like this city, Salt Lake City, helped raise me, and I feel like this city took me in as part of its own family. I just want to say thank you for that, and thank you for everything. And now I've decided to sign with the Boston Celtics. So the second straight year, a high-profile free agent making his announcement here on the 4th of July. Last year, of course, Kevin Durant. Today, Hayward to Boston. Our insider, Adrian Wojnarowski, joining me now. So we see Hayward reuniting now with Brad Stevens, his coach from Butler. How much of that was a major factor in this decision?
My sense in talking to people, it was not as big of a factor as I think everybody wants to believe. He had an elite coach in Utah, in Quinn Snyder, who helped them become an all-star, built the entire offense around him, and you saw his game evolve in lots of different ways. The biggest factors and what people have described to me, and it's been throughout this process, the chance to be an all-NBA player, to be an all-star, to have perhaps an easier path to the NBA Finals, that's all in the Eastern Conference now, and geography. Salt Lake City is a great NBA market. Boston is unique, the history, the tradition. It is hard to compete with New England and all the things that go with Celtic history. But the idea of him trading in Brad Stevens for Quinn Snyder, I don't believe it went that way.
Interesting. Now, everybody had been waiting, as far as the Celtics, for Danny Ainge to make some type of move. Here he goes with this. What could be next here for Boston?
Boston needs some size, some strength up front. You saw against Cleveland last year, and trying to get past the Cavaliers, they physically got beat up front. They have some expendable perimeter players here. A lot of executives tonight, trying to get a sense of who exactly Boston may be willing to move. Jay Crowder, Avery Bradley, players like that who are going to have value on the market. Can they help Boston bring back some size up front?
What about Utah, of course, now needing to find a replacement there for Hayward? What's their plan?
I talked to Dennis Lindsay, their general manager, tonight, and he reminded everybody they've got a great young core there and that they're going to compete. They still see themselves as a playoff team. Rudy Gobert, at 24 years old, is going to be an All-NBA center. They brought in Ricky Rubio at the point. They're out in free agency. Rudy Gay is still available on the market. Utah has interest in him. Miami, San Antonio has expressed some interest in Rudy Gay. So that's a wing player that, is a short-term, can be a short-term gap. There's no replacing a Gordon Hayward in Utah. They drafted him. They developed him. That is not a place you're going to go out and get elite free agents, and that's why this loss ultimately is so devastating for the Jazz.
Of course, this is now the domino effect, right? Maybe Rudy Gay is the next domino to fall. Woj.
He's missed it intentionally. Hayward with a rebound, 2 seconds. Hayward with 1 second. Half-court heat for 3. It's off the rim, and it's over in Indy. Duke is back atop college basketball's elite final score. Duke 61, Butler 59.
That would have been the greatest moment in college basketball history. For that shot, that school to beat that school. Well, for the second time, Brad Stevens has helped recruit Gordon Hayward. First to Butler, now to Boston. ESPN's NBA reporter Chris Haynes got the 4th of July fireworks started with a tweet at 2:17 Eastern Time. 4.5 hours later, it became official with a Players Tribune tweet.
2,100 words of thanks to Utah for the last 7 years. Hayward posting an emotional, really heartfelt apology to Jazz fans who he credits for helping raise him while he was there in Salt Lake. But in the end, it was time to reunite with Stevens, and I think that moment right there may have had a little something to do with it. Part of his post reading this, and that unfinished business we had together back in 2010 when I left Butler for the NBA. As far as I'm concerned, all these years later, we still have it, and that's to win a championship.
Gordon Hayward has increased his points per game every season he's played in the NBA. He's the only player to increase his scoring output in each of the last 6 NBA seasons. Put up 21.9 points per game last season. Utah plays kind of slowly. Celtics play much quicker under Brad Stevens. We could see that number go up again, more opportunities off the break. Now, his teammates took to Twitter to welcome him aboard. Isaiah Thomas, we saw him dance earlier after Chris Haynes' report. And then after it was official, let's get to it. Shamrocks, watch emoji, the whole thing. And then Al Horford chimed in. Aura Hess, the time is now. Welcome Gordon Hayward. The Celtics could be beasts in the East.
Domino's, man. Otto Porter's been picked up, according to The Vertical. The Washington forward signing the Nets offer sheet today. Reportedly 4 years, $106 million max deal. The Wizards now have until 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time Saturday to match. Reportedly, that is their plan.
More moves. Bill Gallinari headed to the Clippers in a 3-team sign and trade. League sources tell Adrian Wojnarowski he agreed to a 3-year, $65 million contract. Of course, J.J. Redick's in Philly. Hawks received Jamal Crawford, Diamond Stone, a 2018 first-round pick. Denver receives a second-round pick in 2019.
Yes. 2015, LaMarcus Aldridge signing with the Spurs after 9 seasons with the Blazers. 2016, Kevin Durant left the Thunder for the Warriors on Independence Day, and the fireworks followed as he won Finals MVP last month and the championship his first. And yesterday, All-Star Gordon Hayward going from Utah to Boston, reuniting with former college coach Brad Stevens. What a day it was. Let's bring in the man who broke the story, NBA insider Chris Haynes. Chris, what can you tell us about Hayward's decision to sign with the Celtics here?
Look, I think what it boiled down to was his relationship with Coach Brad Stevens. Those guys really do share a genuine close bond, and it hasn't wavered at all during the course of his professional career. That, alongside the Eastern Conference, where he feels like he has a better path to reaching the NBA Finals. And then you look at the team. I think that he feels like the team is more equipped to be able to make a deep run. I know it was extremely difficult for him to reach that decision, to leave a place that he's been with for 7 years, a community that has embraced him. But I got an inkling, even in the morning. Like I remember I told you guys yesterday when I was on your show that I feel like that I was told Boston felt pretty good. That was early in the morning yesterday, that they felt really good about their chance of getting him away. So I knew where he was leaning until I got word, afternoon that it was, that's who we had decided. So, but it was a whirlwind for him, man. It had to be a difficult decision for him.
It was interesting also reading what he wrote in the Players Tribune, saying that after each meeting he left thinking that was the best fit for him, right? So at the beginning of his long process of decision making. This offseason, Chris, Danny Ainge, so he's added Hayward, Jason Tatum, another first-round pick in 2018. What's the buzz that you're hearing around the league about what the Celtics have done so far?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people, I spoke to a couple teams, they applaud the Celtics for being able to land a guy. Because, look, everybody's talking about the West. Hey, man, who's gonna be able to contend with the Warriors? Can Houston really be a legitimate threat? And then they were saying in the East, well, it's just Cleveland. Now it's kind of changed a little bit. Now Boston is right there, and I think most teams are still believe that clear cut. When healthy, Cleveland, is the favorite, but they got a battle now. That it won't be a cakewalk now. So a lot of people I spoke to are applauding that move and the fact that it kind of helps the landscape of the East to where it's not as one team driven like it is in the West Coast. So, you got to give Danny Ainge credit. And one thing about what happened as well, look, there probably would have been a legitimate chance, probably, depending on what Kevin Pritchard in Indiana what was his motives. But, they did feel like if they did get a verbal from Gordon Hayward, that they would have a good shot of getting Paul George. But Kevin Pritchard, general manager of the Pacers, had other motives, and you wonder if he was even at all entertaining trading Paul George within the conference. So, but Boston, I definitely think they hit a home run.
You mentioned earlier that this was a whirlwind yesterday for Hayward. You broke the story. And maybe the best way to describe what you went through, too. Hayward's agent said no decision had been made after you broke the story. and you stood by your report. What was the last 24 hours like for you when this story seemed like, what's going on? Is he going? Is he staying? Is he going to Miami? What was it like for you?
So when I got word that he had made a decision to go to Boston, I was also told that the announcement was going to come around 30 to 45 minutes from then. So that's why that's another reason why I want to hurry up and get that out, because I felt announcement. I was told an announcement is coming. So when Mark Bartelstein, who I respect and admire, he's a good guy. When he starts saying those stuff and people taking his quotes and putting it out there, I felt like obviously this thing got ahead of them. This is something that they weren't expecting. They didn't. These are three classy organizations he's dealing with, first-class organizations he's dealing with, and you have to give them a heads up first. You have to let them know that the last thing you want to do is have these organizations finding out through the media. So I understand what he's doing in this situation, and obviously they wanted to make sure they got their story right for the Player Tribune to get that out, and they just weren't prepared for it. But I stood by my reporting, regardless of what anybody was saying, and I felt like there was no need to tweet, no need to say anything. I was going to let it stand by itself, and was willing to wait until they got their story straight to put on the Tribune or whatever they were going to do with it. So that was my whole thing. Mm-hmm. So that's how I felt about the whole situation.
Well, Chris, we appreciate your reporting. And we should mention, by the way, he was on a flight out west while this was going down, too. Thank you very much. Chris is going to be back in the 9 o'clock hour with plenty more on Hayward and the Celtics. Thank you, Chris. Hayward, if you haven't put two and two together,